So over to Ken.
Right. I'm going to leave a passage in Mark. That's Ken Shepherd, believe it or not. Now, you know this, but there we go. And it is Luke 6:37 to 42. Not the most dynamic and in theory a bit boring, but of course you have to take the rough with the smooth, don't you? So it is Luke 6:37 to 42. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured over your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. He also told them this parable. Can a man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into the pit? A student is not above his teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank that is in your eye? How can you say to your brothers, brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when you yourself fail to see the plank that is in your own? You hypocrite, take first the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye. Quite an interesting passage, but there we go. We take it in bits, I think. The interesting thing is that it points out very clearly at the beginning of this big sermon, which is earlier than we started, that Matthew was preaching this from a flat place. Now, why the heck did he say that? Well, it's interesting because in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount is supposed to be preached on a mountain, or a hill anyway, very well known. And here, I don't know whether he's done it for emphasis, but in Luke, he said Jesus was preaching on a level place. Now that tells us, you see, and I think it's very true, that Jesus essentially was preaching the same thing as he preached on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount, and it's quite logical because he was probably doing roughly the same thing in many places. So he was preaching the same type of word, sermon, again and again and again. So why was he doing that? But the reason is that we need to be told frequently. If you tell us once, we'll forget. I mean, there's the army saying, which is well known across the world. When you teach them, you tell them what you're going to teach them, then you tell them what you've told them. That's the 3 times. Now, Carlos Ortiz, which most of you won't remember because before your time, was a very well-known preacher from Argentina, worldwide. He had lots of books and things, which is very interesting. And at one stage, he preached the same sermon 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And at the end of that time, the guy said, well, look, you know, we know what you preach. We know we can virtually tell you word for word what you're preaching. Why on earth are you doing it? He said, because you're not listening, because you hear the words, but you're not responding. I will preach the same sermon until your heart grabs what I'm saying, and it's not just words, but it's actions. Very interesting. I don't know whether he preached the 7th week. I didn't hear about that, but still, there we go. So that's that little session. But here, Jesus is kind of judging the things like, well, he's saying, do not judge and do not condemn, because the resultant response will be a negative. Now, we're in a position now where, of course, with social media, our opinion is kind of flashed across the world, but our disagreements, our attitude is flashed across the world, so that other people can kind of agree with us, and then loads of people won't agree with us. So there's corners, that the corners get bigger and bigger because people disagree with you. And the interesting thing is that actually, when you look at our own personalities, we are built in a certain way. We're brought up in a certain way. So we have ways of looking at things which are never pure, because we're looking back to our background, which had many, many issues. So we're always judging from our point of view, which is only our point of view, which is frequently the wrong, well, a point of view which is not pure at all. Our experience is never pure. This will not bring any blessing, because we're bringing our experience from our life, and we certainly are built by our own attitudes in our own situation. So God said, look, you can't do this. You make up your views, but you're so limited. You don't even see it like I do at all. I mean, absolutely stupid comments here that when we got married 60 years ago, believe it or not, later in the year, it was coming. It was only about a few months to Christmas, and when we got to Christmas, we realized that we both actually did the Christmas stuff absolutely differently. We just didn't come up with the same views about presents and kind of attitudes and food, and it was bizarre. Oh, you do that? What a funny thing to do. Because we were brought up that way. So that's another interesting thing. Even here, we have foibles that were kind of different approaches to things. I load the dishwasher and Angela puts things in, but because she puts them in from the other side, they're in the wrong place. So every time when I'm finally doing it, I take everything from the wrong side, put it on the right side, so it's in the right place. One of these things that just kind of happens. It doesn't actually matter, but it's bizarre, because you actually have a slightly different approach. But the promise, of course, if we forgive and if we don't condemn or judge, look at what he says. This, if you come with a pure attitude, the attitude that Jesus brings you, it says, give and it will be given you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over, will be poured over your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. People will see, if you have this approach, that there's something in you that actually they delight in, because they can relate to you, because you forgive, you have the attitude of Jesus. Can we put up our hand and say that's right? No, I see no hands. I see no hands. Dear, oh dear. So, there we go. One hand. Yes. So I'm just going to go to just a couple of other simple things. I wonder how many of you knew the phrase WWJD. WWJD. What would Jesus do? This was a thing about 25 years ago, when you had a little kind of badge like WWJD, and that's a little flapper on your arm. Yeah. And it meant that as situations came up, you kind of thought to yourself, what would Jesus do? Which was very valuable, actually, and it often changed your attitude. I think this has kind of gone out of fashion, and it doesn't happen. Now, I'm going to finalize this with something that Jesus did, which is very interesting and very radical. So I'm going to read to you a passage, and you'll know exactly what it is, and you'll see how Jesus deals with it. And then I will finish. It says in John 8, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, you know what's going to happen now, brought in a woman caught in adultery and made her stand before the group. And he said to Jesus, teacher, this woman was caught in an act of adultery. Of course, you don't worry about the guy, do you? That's an aside. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, teacher, this woman was caught in an act of adultery. In the law of Moses, he commanded us to stone such a woman. Now, what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, if any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked the woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Now go and live your life without sin. Absolutely fantastic. We see so often our view is clouded by our upbringing, our attitude, but when we look to Jesus, so we ought to be going back to thinking quite regularly about, we come to a situation at WWJD, what would Jesus do? Okay, guys.